So my skeptical mind, and that's just who I am. My skeptical mind goes to, well, yeah, of course, you've got this guy over here that's logical and reasonable, and you got this guy over here that's wearing a tinfoil hat. Of course, the tinfoil hat guy's gonna see a lot of stuff, right? He's like imagining it, or he's watched one too many sci-fi movies.
But it can be used to help us frame hypotheses for UFO propulsion, power, stealth, weaponry.
Everything that we experience is very positive.
Sometimes the field of ufology has a short memory span.
We didn't know anything about the $22 million back then. We just kind of thought, well, this is, and I think that was the reason why they were looking for military-type people, because...
Okay, happy Friday, my friends. It is Erica Lukes, happy to be here on UFO Classified, and to always get into chat and see Bill and Northern and all the other friends that join me. I want to give a shout out to Hoska and Irv and Bruce and everybody. I hope you guys are all hanging in there and doing okay. And I want to thank everyone who shows support for UFO Classified and for my research. Every day I am going through my new archive, the Andruffel files, 70 plus boxes of audio interviews, of VHS tapes, of files and correspondence. And last night I got out a file that was of all the correspondence between Major Kehoe and Anne and other people. And it was just really interesting. It is definitely helping further my research, putting the pieces together and seeing really truly how many smoke screens have been put in place since 1947 to keep people from getting to the truth. And my, how convenient UFOs seem to be for a lot of that. Specifically, and particularly in regard to, my favorite subject, Skinwalker Ranch. And I have just been looking at some more information with regard to the solicitation sheets on that. And in here, there is a specific section that says that one of the final papers that needed to be submitted was an integrated threat assessment, a final report and briefing that assesses the foreign threat from advanced aerospace platforms, incorporating the technologies discussed in the individual research reports will be provided to the GPL at the end of the period of performance. An executive version of the report should also be submitted. So isn't that interesting? Again, here we have more of the same, which we should be able to figure out by now, that they are looking at advanced aerospace platforms, technologies, and assessing foreign threats. I really, truly, obviously, it doesn't have anything to do with UFOs, because if it did, well, then why would Elon Musk be doing all that he's doing? Why would so many other countries around the world be sending their ships to Mars and all of these things? Nobody's talked about a threat. We seem to be the only ones. Why is that, Mr. Elizondo? Perhaps you could tell me, George Knapp, when all of you have done such a wonderful job spinning all of our wheels for decades and are continuing to really keep us from the truth. And I think I am really excited that I will be getting more information and putting that forward to you and calling these people out. I was a little naughty on Twitter last night, but what can I say? A girl's got to do what a girl's got to do. Tonight is a special night for me because I am joined by somebody that I've known for 30 years. And the poor dear, Matt has watched me through so many periods of my life, including my very early singing career. I met him because he was our sound engineer for The Groove, and I worked with him on different projects over the years. He's probably one of the most brilliant musicians that I have ever heard. This guy can play anything, and he is so much fun to watch on stage. He makes me happy. Matt has been a professional musician for, how many years, Matt? Wow. And you, honestly, like I said, I love watching you play. You have such a wonderful stage persona, and I've met you, and you and I have just become such wonderful friends, really dear. You're very dear to me, and you have many interests. You're a professional photographer. You are a professional videographer. You travel all over the world to do both of those things, and you are a sound engineer. And I know that I was telling you before the show that that I actually I'm doing my own audio. I am, and clearly I'm not of the talent because nobody can hear your audio. Okay, hang on 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Okay, wait. Now I think they can. But just check your mic just for fun.
If you can hear me out there in the cyber world, comment "honey." Just that way we'll know that.
They can hear you. Oh, God. And this is, over the years, I will say Matt has obviously been there in my music career, and also he has been the one person that I can think of that has really been there and had unique experiences with me as I dipped my toe into the UFO world. And Matt, when I first decided that I was going to go into this, what were your thoughts?
Well, I wasn't. We weren't really close when you decided to get into researching, and it was about 2014 that I knew that you had really started to get interested in the field and really get a lot of data and correspond with people, and so that would have been like a year before we went up to Vernal and did our first interview together with the two ladies up in Vernal, and so that was back in the MUFON days, and I was interested. If anyone has ever heard us go back and forth about the ufology, everyone will know that I am the Scully. I am the skeptic. I'm always the one who asks the questions like, this doesn't make sense, and why doesn't it make sense, and so forth. Whereas Erica is always the Mulder, always hopeful, always trying to understand where people are coming from and accept who they are and accept their experiences and so forth. And I always sit in the background and go, So that's my job in all of this.
Well, I think that's I now that I've been through everything that I've been through. You've been so patient with me, and you've gone along on all these adventures with me, and heard some things that probably and saw some things. I remember you and I went to I dragged you to a UFO conference.
The infamous UFO conference, yes.
And I have like a little teeny clip. This is just really silly, but I just want to play this because it made me laugh. I was looking through my footage. So this is Matt and I sitting at a UFO conference out in the middle of the desert. It was super hot and all that good stuff. But listen to this. It's really silly, but it should make you laugh.
I'm here at the Matthew Hepburns, and we are in contact with the desert. That's so stupid.
And we are
now I can't hear.
Okay, it's really low.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if you can't hear, Matt.
Okay. What?
Okay, that was God.
So you'll need to explain to me what clip you just played.
Okay, anyway, I'm so sorry. Oh, Lord. Anyway, I'll be paying you for lessons. I know you've tried to give me them over the years many times. So I've got a specific, little clip of you and I, and we were sitting in the desert, and we were waiting for the illustrious group of speakers to come out.
Oh, yes.
And they were like, ringing bells, and, it was so funny because I just... I just remember, and I have it on video, thank goodness, but it's just like panning over to you. And the look on your face is like, seriously, you are terrified. Like, terrified. And I mean, just like, what are we hearing? And I actually recorded, just a little bit of, little portions of some of the lectures, like 30-second clips and things. And I'm listening to those, and I now can fully understand your terror.
Well, the part of that was that I am a polar bear. I like cold temperatures. I like things cooler. And Joshua Tree, California is the antithesis of a nice, cool place to be, because it was the early summer, and it was like 112 or 113 degrees or something like that. And I was just dying. It
was very hot. Yeah, it was. I don't know how the speakers got up on stage and actually pulled that off, but that is the conference. You met Nick Redfern there, which, Nick has always been a good friend and a great help in my research and things. And that was, it was a lot of fun. And for those of us who are new to the show, because I'm getting, again, more messages from people lots of different places that really surprised me, that are starting to listen to the show. And I had, when I was state director for MUFON, and I've got to just, if you guys have heard this before, I apologize, but I need to just put this out there because I'd like to talk a little bit about this to Matt. We've gone over this on different radio shows, but again, it's an important subject. So I was a bright-eyed and enthusiastic, and wanting to just do the best that I could to make everybody happy, and to try to help MUFON gain more credibility. And I worked my keister off to try to do that, and to include everyone. And I met Ruben Uriarte, who is a very kind man, and he is one of the higher ups at MUFON, and he introduced me to a fellow, because Ruben had been doing his little radio show, and I mean little, I think he maybe had one listener, and he would go on there, and so both Ruben and I would go onto the show and make guest appearances, and then this fellow became more demanding of my time. It was very strange, just started acting, it alarmed me. So he asked if I would come on behalf of MUFON to do an interview for him down at Contact in the Desert. And I wanted to bring my friend Matt to do some interviews, and to also just have my back, because I knew something was really, really off with that whole situation. And so, Matt, just go over, if you don't mind, again, just the experience that you had when you first talked with Cameron, and the way things went down.
Yeah, it's such a, I mean, it's funny now because we've had the benefit of time to kind of process everything that had happened with him and the whole trip. But his idea was to do a video broadcast, a video stream from Contact in the Desert. And you had told him that, oh, I know somebody that does video, and he can probably help us if you'd be willing to pay him, because he is a professional and he will want to be paid for his time and his expertise. And so you asked me if I would be interested in doing that. I said, sure, that's fairly easy to do anymore. So yeah, happy to help. And so I think you gave him my number, and he called. We had about a 10-minute chat. And it was very clear from the very beginning that one, he had no idea what he was talking about, and two, that there was just something. Yeah, and I'm trying not to be mean, because mental illness and mental dysfunction is a serious thing, and there was definitely something going on with the guy, and it manifested itself in a way that was not very kind and not very pleasant. And so because it was just turning into a very uncomfortable call very quickly for me, I decided that I would not be able to help this guy with his video stream. And towards the end of the conversation, I remember him saying, "Well, can you send me a resume?" And I said, "Gosh, I haven't had a resume in 20 years. I have more work than I know what to do with, and so I don't have a resume." And he said, "Oh, that's okay. Just go ahead and send me your contact list." And the last thing I was going to do was send this guy my clients and have him call my clients and subject them to what I had been subjected to. And I said, I think most of my clients are pretty busy. I don't know that they would have time to sing my praises or tell you anything about me. And so I called Erica immediately after speaking with him, and I told her, because I love her and I want to make sure that she insulates herself from people that don't mean the best for her. I told her, run and run fast. Don't do anything with this guy. He's going to be nothing but trouble. But because Erica believes so firmly in what she does and with ufology and so forth, your attitude has always been, this will help people. Even if I have to go through a bunch of crap, this is going to be helpful not only for me but for others. And so you went ahead and you did the show, and it was an audio only broadcast. Oh, and he was going to pay me to come down, and I told you, no, I don't want to be beholden to this guy for anything, so I will pay my own way down to Contact in the Desert. And so we did the audio show, and you had, I can't remember the director's name, the film director's name that you had. You signed him up for the guest to be a guest on that show.
Yes, why am I totally blanking on his name? It was funny. I was just watching a video with him. Sid Goldberg.
Sid Goldberg, yes. And I knew that things were going to be wrong when we got there because now I had actually seen this person, Cameron, in the flesh, as it were, and he was just off. He was really, really off. He didn't have headphones for any of his guests, so nobody could hear what anybody was saying.
And then there were people that had not only in the studio but elsewhere. So he was trying to pull in. So that's what made it really difficult for all of us that were in the studio. We couldn't hear anybody.
And finally, he gets to ask Sid a question. And so he asks Sid a question. Sid gets about 30 seconds into his answer. And Sid, for those of you that don't know him, he's got a couple of awards, right? A couple of Emmys or nominations or so forth.
And he's been very active in the world of UFOs as well.
Yeah, and so he knows what he's talking about. He's smart. He knows what he's doing. He's award winning, and you don't get awards in that field unless you're really, really good at what you do. And so he's 30 seconds into his answer, and suddenly Cameron gets a call, and Cameron cuts him off and says, "Oh, we have a call," and takes the call and never gets back to Sid about anything.
Yeah, that was a real uncomfortable thing because I had arranged that and brought Sid there and was trying to do all of this and be the best sponsor, spokesperson for MUFON that I could at that point. And it was, at that conference when I knew after that interview that I was in deep trouble. And I just remember thinking, oh my Lord, I cannot be, I really don't want to be left alone without somebody that I know around me because I just didn't know what he was going to do. And he went up to a couple of people and said things like he was, if you're not forthright with me, then I'll get my connections from the NSA and, have you looked into and different, just very strange comments. And I know that the other people that interacted with him could definitely see there was something wrong. And there was one point in time, I remember you had dropped me off and you were trying to find parking, and this was after had told him, I was trying to distance myself, and I remember, walking across some of the desert, and then seeing him, and he had spotted me, and he was coming towards me he was running as fast as he could, which was walking, but but I just remember, and he had that look in his eye, and I remember, calling you, and then I called Ruben, and I just said, Ruben, I'm scared out of my mind. You've known this guy. What am I supposed to do? Just stay on the phone with me. And then after I really went home, I understood, because he kept calling and threatening me and threatening my family. And he, after that, did a series of his radio shows, quote unquote, where he specifically went on there and called me a slut. He said I was having menage a trois in the middle of the open at this conference. And so because of some of the things that he said, and he also contacted people that I was working with and told them all these things. And so because I rebuked him, and he said some things and mentioned my family by name, and I was absolutely, it was horrifying. It was so frightening for me and for my family. And because of some of the things that he said, they were put out to specific people in MUFON who used that information. I heard the other day that people are still talking about my menage a trois at the conference, and I just want to go on record saying there's hardly one guy at a UFO conference that that would fit my bill. Maybe, and there would never be two. I'm telling you. And so I'm sorry, I don't mean to, but it's just like, come on, and I was every time I was, there and I'm just trying to do the best I could to represent. And it was, just stupefying. What did you think, Matt, when all this started to happen, I knew that you had told me, to watch it and to be careful. But did you realize how serious it would get?
I wasn't. I knew that it would get weird, and I know that he did not have your best interests at heart, and so you talking about this made me remember when he would say, that's okay. I have Homeland Security. I can look you up.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And I said, you don't have Homeland Security. Homeland Security is a government agency. You don't have Homeland Security. You can say you have access to Homeland Security, but really, who are you? Essentially, he was a lot of talk and nothing to back it up. But the thing that really, there were two things that really made me mad. And the first thing was that he was besmirching you and your good reputation, all based on, I think that he felt like if you had come to contact in the desert, that he was going to be your best friend and you were always going to be seen together, and when that obviously didn't happen, he took it personally and just started to assassinate your character and made it really tough on you. And that pisses me off. That made me really upset because I know who you are. We were together the whole time except for like an hour, I think, one night. And so hearing all of these lies, just these bald-faced lies from him about you, just really made me mad. And it's difficult to be mad at someone, based on whatever dysfunction they have. I'm fully convinced that what made him such an unpleasant person was whatever was going on mentally with him. And so I didn't want to be mad at him for that, but I was, if I take that out of the equation, here was this idiot who was being mean to my best friend, and I didn't appreciate that. The second thing that really upset me was if there were menage a trois happening at Contact in the Desert and you knew about them and you didn't invite me, come on. I mean, we've never had that relationship. But if other people down there, if there were a bunch of menage a trois going on, I would like to have known about it.
Oh my God.
I mean, I was single at the time. I'm still single. I would want to know about it. So
You're so
I was
bad.
pissed at you, Erica.
I know. Sorry.
There were menage a trois happening at Contact in the Desert, and you didn't tell me about them. I didn't hear about that until we got back, and he got on his radio show and was saying, that director of MUFON, that state director out there at Contact in the Desert, MUFON should know about what she's doing. Oh, it was so. Again, not to look at it, parochially, but you can't argue with crazy. And if somebody says something crazy, it's really hard to defend yourself when what they have said is just so far out of left field and that is an absolute fantasy. It's really difficult to deal with a situation like that. And try though you did, and you did all the right things. I just felt terrible that you ever got hooked up with that situation and had to deal with that guy.
Well, and I'm so grateful that you were, so supportive of me, because it was a really frightening time. And to see that he would, he contacted, the higher ups at MUFON and sent letters that were, just absolutely insane. He contacted my old radio show producer, who barely told me about it and wouldn't write a letter for me so I could try to, again, get another restraining order, which I had tried to do. And I also spent quite a bit of money working with a lawyer in hopes that I could get some help with that. And because I was a public figure, you really can't, there's not a lot of things you can do. And I got a message from another female researcher who was in the LA area, and she said that she was at a conference there and that he had come up and just started talking about me and said that he was going to kill me. And so it was, and at that time, I reached out to several people in MUFON that were state directors, and I said, if this guy contacts you, I need to know. I'm in fear for my safety. And would you think that any of them would let me know or act like they had my back or anything? No. And I also had Ruben, you were kind enough to do this, and a couple other people that wrote letters on my behalf telling the executive director, then Jen Harzan, that you were concerned for my well-being. And of course, Jan did not want to have anything to do with that. That was my own problem, even though I was representing MUFON and things. And I never expected them to represent me legally. That was never even asked. It was just a matter of putting the word out to let me know what he'd said and trying to insulate me, as you should do when somebody's in a situation like that. But we now know that women in the subject of the wacky world of UFOs are often not treated the best way that they could be. And so it was just a difficult time. And I had received a message from him, a few months ago. And
wow.
So it kept going and it kept going, and I kept finding more and more people that he'd contacted. Anybody that I even looked at, he was contacting. And it was like, it was really terrifying.
Yeah,
me.
that event, your audience may want to know that this happened 5 years ago, over 5 years ago, this incident.
Yeah, it was a long time. And yeah, it's one of those things that I know that this has happened to other women in the field, and I know that people need to be on the lookout and be protective of other people, in this subject. And I know that after every conference, or when I was speaking at a conference, I would make sure to just tell security that I needed people to look out for this person, and because he threatened to kill me, and on more than one occasion. And so that was it was a special treat. But I'm, again, like I say, I'm glad that you're there. And you had looked. We were talking at the beginning of the week, and you had looked and found his obituary in the paper. And I have to say, when you told me that, I mean, I just burst out in tears, because that whole thing was just so horrible. And then to see that the people in the UFO community, certain people, took that information and then they continued to push it forward to try to hurt me further, was just absolutely stupefying.
Well, I what you said about women in ufology, and let's face it, in our society, women in practically any field. I mean, even our new first lady was taken to task for using the term doctor in front of her name because she has a doctorate, and people that have doctorates are typically referred to as doctor. But because she's a woman, this idiot in the Wall Street Journal took her to task. Hey kiddo, don't use Dr. Biden in front of your name. Don't use doctor. And so that whole attitude is so pervasive in every field. And I think I'm not sure if it probably is worse in ufology. I don't know to what degree, but if any woman is discovered to actually be involved in it in a very pure research oriented fashion, and not just there as a groupie for the guys, I think that tends to make some men it tends to hurt some men's feelings, because they're like, wait a minute, they're just here for the UFOs and they're not here for me because I'm so amazing. That's where Cameron was coming from. He wanted you to be his hood ornament for the whole conference, and that's not what you do, and that's not why you were there. And remember how he was telling Sid, and I heard him tell other people, that his radio show had more listeners than Howard Stern. And he did have a radio show. He had a couple of different radio shows, and he was on LA Talk Radio and several other stations here towards the end. But he probably had 5. He might have had 5 or 6 listeners. And in fact, there was a journalist doing an article about you and about how difficult it is for women in ufology, and you told him about this Cameron guy, and you after you had done that and he had done the background, you asked him, what about, what'd you find out about Cameron, and is that going to be something to include in your story? And he said, no, I'm just really not into taking mentally ill people to task in print. Because you can tell if you've been around enough people with mental dysfunction like I have, you can pretty much identify them right off the bat, which is how I was able to know in just a couple of minutes after our initial phone conversation that, like, oh, this is not good. This is not someone I really need to be around, because I knew that whatever happened would have been my fault. And that's exactly what happened to you. He blamed you for the terrible show that he had down at Contact in the Desert. It's like, wait a minute, I brought you an award-winning director. I brought you all of my knowledge and have been doing all this work to make your radio show so much better than it would have been without all of that help. And suddenly, when his show crapped the bed, he blamed you for it. And I feel so bad about that. I mean, when I saw his obituary, the first thing I thought of was, well, good. Now this guy, I mean, I don't wish death on anyone. Death is not something I wish on anybody. But I just thought, now Erica will be safe. She'll be safe from this guy who had it out for her and was not well balanced.
Yeah, I mean, it was like I said, you told me that, and I was very emotional because it just brought back so many memories, and, I feel badly that he was in such a horrible place, and that he wasn't getting, obviously, the help that he needed, and things like that. But it goes to, it was definitely a learning experience for me, and I guess it toughened me up in a lot of ways, because as I've gone through this, my time in the public spotlight in this subject, I've been, the subject of a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, a handful of very insecure men. Let's put it that way, and maybe one insecure woman, but and I could say so much. I just won't. But,
yeah, I understand.
But it's like it's like even yesterday I'm like looking on Twitter, reading all this stuff that this Yutz is putting forward about me and the show and all these things. And I had another person that went, on and said on his little YouTube show that he was going to F me up. And I mean, it's just like, holy cow. I don't know if people understand how difficult it is. And especially being a woman in a male dominated subject where, there's not a lot of integrity to begin with. And it's just been a real tricky journey and a very, I don't know. I'm trying to get tougher. Let's just put it that way.
Well, and it's too bad that you have to. Not only is it, it's difficult stuff to study and to research and to find people who are being honest about their experiences, and I mean, it's a tough field to get into, regardless of gender. But then you add, that other X chromosome on top of it, and women do have a really tough time. And I've met several of them through you, and you all have a lot of the same things to talk about. So many of your experiences are similar, and that's really a shame. It's really a shame for the entire field of ufology, because just think of where the science could be now if it weren't for all of this other crap that women have to go through. Instead of having their findings brought to the forefront like it would be with anybody else who brings good research forward. It's just a shame to think about where ufology would be if if women were treated the same way as men.
Well, and I mean, it brings up another point about ufology, the quote unquote, the community and things. And I think that, I've been very passionate over the past few months, especially kind of talking about some of the racism and things that are taking place in the subject, and the fact that we've got this whole group of people that are promoting very dangerous false information, specifically, the anti-vax, anti-mask stuff, when they're promoting things that are absolutely just insane. I mean, they're not fact-based at all. And that is really unfortunate that a subject that we should be taking seriously is lined with people or filled with people that are completely unhinged and that are pulling all this kind of conspiracy theory crap about the lizard people and all of this. I mean, bonkers.
Yeah, and one of the things that I have started to think about not only in ufology, but just in our society in general, and possibly the rest of the societies that are on the planet, is that we need to find a way to agree that we share a common reality, and that we need to be able to agree about something, whether that is gravity. You know, if I tell someone I'm holding a 5-pound weight, and if I let go of it, what do you think will happen? We need to have a common reality, a shared reality, where we both go, oh, you drop a 5-pound weight on the planet Earth and it will fall to the ground, or until it hits a point where the friction will hold it in place and it will no longer have motion, and that's because there's gravity. But it seems like there are a lot of people in all sorts of different fields of research and just in society in general that will say, no, it's not going to hit the ground. You drop a 5-pound weight, it won't hit the ground, and they can have all of these beliefs, and they will try to convince you that 5-pound weight will not hit the ground. But you know, and okay, your belief is cool. That's fine, except that is now outside of our shared reality. that is a fringe belief that gravity isn't a real thing. And so trying to find that shared reality, that common experience is getting tougher these days. And I, you know, me being the skeptic, I always tend to see it more in ufology, you know, those sort of fringe beliefs, and it gets in the way. It clouds the whole. It clouds all of the experience inside of it. If that does that make sense to you?
No, it absolutely does, and I think, you know, I mean, I know that a majority of people that get into this, you know, the turn to the UFO community, are people like myself who have experienced something that they can't explain. And so they think, here, you know, we've got this group of like-minded people. And then slowly it's like they're being, you know, they're becoming a victim of a cult, really, is what it's like. And so you get these people in leadership positions that are promoting things that are just absolutely freaking unhinged. I mean, it's just, you know, and you've got people that are traumatized, people that have had experiences that have really rocked their world. They can't tell their families, and they're, you know, afraid they're going to be ostracized by their social community and things, and so they turn to this community and they end up getting eaten up and spit out. And to me, that is just so. It's sad, and I have on many shows called attention to the lack of leadership, ethical leadership in this subject. I have gone to almost everyone who is a high-profile person in the subject, and I've said, hey, there's a problem here. What are we going to do? And every single person said, that's the way it's always going to be. I'm not going to get involved. And I remember there was a specific woman in the subject who has different, you know, platforms and things that I had turned to, and she has a group for women in the subject. And I said, you know, this is going on. You know, we need to be aware of this. And she deleted my comment and said that she wouldn't tolerate my kind of comment because it wasn't positive. And I sat there with my jaw on the floor thinking, oh, really? You're a groundbreaking, trailblazing woman in this field, and yet you don't have the back of other women, and you are promoting absolute crap. And it was just like, you know, no wonder, because the people who are in charge of this dog and pony show have the ethics of a frickin' alley cat. Well, actually, alley cats have more ethics.
I think you're right. Yeah, and ethics are a big part of our shared human experience, and it's interesting to see how unethical someone will be to benefit their own goal, and yeah, it's tough to watch things like that happen, and I know it's happened to you, and it's happened to a lot of other women, and maybe it happens to men too, but in ufology, it seems like all the men get together and they say, okay, what have you been up to? Oh, that's so interesting, and they tend to support one another, whereas if a woman comes into the mix, that tends to throw men off. At least in other fields too, but specifically in ufology, it's almost like
Is that because most of these people have never been on a date or something?
Well, and that's I'm trying to think of a really sensitive way to say
clearly
that,
I just wasn't. I'm sorry, but
well, no, it's I'm a nerd. I'm a total
I am
geek.
too, obviously.
And when I say nerd, I don't want it to sound like a pejorative, but a lot of the men in the UFO field are nerds, but they fit more of the classical definition of the term, and perhaps they haven't seen a woman intimately for a really long time, and that can be threatening to some men. And if it's a room full of geeks, an attractive woman like you walking into the room can throw some men, into a tizzy, because now suddenly it's not about what you can bring to the field and what research you've done and what conclusions you've come to. Now all of a sudden it's, well, there's a girl here. Guys, there's a girl here. Did you see the girl? And she's pretty. And then, yeah, when it devolves to that point, it's really hard to get back on task about, what are we really doing here? What are we really talking about? Can it just be about the research or the study of ufology without all of the histrionics from the men about women being here?
That would be good, but I definitely think there's that, unfortunately, that part of the community as a whole that definitely is it's a little troubling, I think, for multiple reasons. But I think that it would be so important to actually have, and that's why I love the people that listen to my show, because yes, we are all nerds. We've got that going on, but we're not unethical, and things like that. I mean, I've got some great people that I'm fortunate to know, and I'm grateful for that. But I don't know. I mean, it is sad, because sometimes we are our own worst enemy, and it's hard enough when you've got, like you were saying, you've got a subject that is, I mean, people, look at you like you're crazy when you're talking about UFOs, and you can't have, and I can see why, actually, listening to some of the stuff that I've listened to over the years, but there is something that is very worthy of study. And when you have all of this kind of behavior and behaviorisms, it really does marginalize the subject. And it's bad enough that we've got the disinformation from certain people that are inserted into the subject. But there are so many hurdles to overcome, and we definitely have to work on that. And so I know, for me, sometimes there'll be people that say, well, why do you keep talking about this? And that was, in fact, one of the things that I got. I was at a conference and I talked about this, maybe on one of my shows. I'm not sure if I had mentioned that I was with, I'd done an interview on Coast to Coast with George Knapp, and I was talking about Skinwalker Ranch, and then I brought up the issues of sexism and abuse in the subject, and I subsequently was really harassed by a couple other people that are involved. I don't even want to say their names, but just nasty human beings. And I pulled Jimmy Church aside at one of the conferences, and I just said, Jimmy, I need your help here. What can I do about this? And he said to me, Erica, the second you mentioned sexism in the field of ufology, you lost all of your audience.
Well, and isn't that indicative of the root of the problem.
Yeah. I mean, it was just like, oh okay. I mean, surprise, surprise. But yeah, it was just it's been a very surreal thing. But I think drawing, you have to every so often revisit this because you get younger people in the subject that are turning, to people that are leading, leaders in public, and they need to hear this. And again, like how do you make change if you are hiding your head under a rug? That just doesn't happen. You have to be accountable. You have to be active. You have to have other things, other people in a cohesive unit that are of the same mindset and that want to see a bit of professionalism and want to see things done in like if you were at a job. If you were at a job, your employers would have an expectation of you, and you would have to behave professionally, and certain things would be illegal in the job, on the job front. But why isn't that the case in ufology?
I think perhaps it's because it is such a boys' club that it's one of those unwritten rules that, like, TikTok, the game is locked and nobody else can play. And if it's a girl, we'll ostracize her, we'll belittle her, unless she's interested in one of us for different reasons. And that's where that's where it gets really ugly. It's really a shame. And I also want to comment on what you said about younger people getting into the field. People are experiencing these sort of phenomena more and more and more. And there are more and more people on the planet. And when they experience something that they don't understand and they need to gain some clarity on it to get some peace of mind and understand what they went through, and they get involved in following people like you and the other researchers that are doing good work, and to find that the whole field is kind of a cesspool of really yucky. This is where the cloudiness of the whole field comes in, when it gets polluted by all these other things that are untrue. And I remember at Contact in the Desert, there were these two. I think they were twins. There were two twins that were there, and they were both experiencers, and they were like the only, maybe teenagers, maybe early 20s, and they just got nothing but crap from other men around there. And it was hard to watch. And it's like, if the field that you've done so much good work in can actually help people, if it weren't for all the other crap that is involved in the field, it's really a shame that it can't be more helpful for people right now, because it is polluted with all the other stuff that really doesn't belong in ufology.
Yeah, and it's, like I said, there are so many good things other than everything you've just heard. But since I have wanted to study this, I have learned so much about so many things, and I have established relationships, friendships with people that will be lifelong friends to me. And I have met some of the most beautiful and courageous and intelligent, heartfelt people that I could have ever hoped to meet in my life. And so for me, I think that I keep doing this, even though I keep getting kicked around, because of these wonderful people, and because of the fact that I have really enriched my life in so many ways. I've learned so many different things that it's just been, as hard as it has been very cool, and it has been empowering. And, when I do a show like this where I'm talking about specific, the treatment of women, I have just been amazed to see other women who will find me and come to me and tell me their stories. And it's heartbreaking because there is nobody that they can turn to. And that is just wrong. You even turn to other women in the field and they don't have, they're out to lunch and don't have any integrity. And there's a really good, and I want to just throw this out there. If you guys, I did a show on the Paracast about 3 years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And on that show, it was a women's roundtable of ufology, what was wrong with ufology. I was on that show with Chase Kletsky and Kathleen Martin. And at that point in time, I was out of, MUFON and things, and I tried to call them on the carpet and tried to get them to say things. And it was just very shocking and just stupefying to see some of the responses from other women that should know better. I don't know what. It was pretty interesting. But listen, if you guys can listen to the women's roundtable on ufology, that definitely would be eye-opening as well.
And did you get the idea that the reason that they didn't want to address what you were talking about was because they had kind of, been accepted into the club and they didn't want to rock that boat?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that they were, I think Kathleen I like Kathleen a lot. And I think sometimes that she is between a rock and a hard place with specific things. But still, it's like we have to, we have to call this stuff out. We have a responsibility to protect each other. And that clearly, nobody seems to be doing that in this subject. So,
well, and people are also really fearful. I mean, it is. There's a lot of paranoia in the field, and there's almost a feeling that like if I talk to someone about my research, they're just going to take it and make it their own and not give me my due respect for that research. And so some people just don't want to get involved with it because they feel like it's going to be stolen, and it has been stolen. I know that you've had a bunch of your stuff stolen and not been recognized for it being your work, and that's tough too. That goes beyond just the sexism in ufology, but yeah, the paranoia is not helpful. I mean, is it really ever? No, probably not. But yeah,
the
paranoia
is not helpful. No, I like that. That's a good little soundbite there. I love it. And so we're going to take a break, and then when we get back, we're going to talk about a couple of a family that we've had the privilege of interviewing, and they've been a family that I've been in touch with for years, and it was a really cool thing because the son contacted me, and he was working in the oil fields next to Skinwalker Ranch and had seen a series of things. And as I began to talk to him more and pull information out of him, it became very apparent to me that I needed to do as much as I could to document what the rest of the family was experiencing in an area outside of Skinwalker Ranch where strange things happen. But, what do they do to? We're not quite sure. But I'm going to play a series of those interviews and then get your thoughts, Matt, as we weigh in on that. It's very, very cool. I just want to thank my dear friend, Matt Hepworth, for being here. We're actually going to be playing a song of his because like I mentioned, he's a brilliant musician, among many other things. And I want to thank all of my UFO Classified supporters who are here every week lifting me up and who are protecting me, who are making sure that the show stays on the air, because it is it takes a lot of my time. In fact, I think I work harder at this than I do, my other full-time job. And I am so passionate about it, but I appreciate all of your support. So thank you very much. I want to give a little shout out to Scott Brown from In the Field. Love it. Beautiful graphic artist, and does a great job with in the field. So we're going to take a break. And then, Matt, I'm going to play Storm of Brain.
Oh, good times.
Do you want to give us a little info about that?
Oh, that was a project that I was working on with a dear friend of mine, Kent Ridding. He's a brilliant guitar player, and we were going to do kind of a duo called Storm of Brain, and it never really went anywhere. But I've known Kent for forever. Almost my whole life, and just getting to make music with that guy is just a joy.
Well, good. I'm excited to play this. And so we're going to listen to this. We're going to take a break, and we will be back with some of those interviews that Matt and I did up in the Uinta Basin. So stick around. We will be back. That was mighty nice. That was my friend Matt Hepworth, who is a talented musician, sound engineer, videographer, and photographer. I mean, blah blah blah. I mean, obviously, you just excel at everything.
I just don't know what I want to be when I grow up. Thank you.
But you're having fun, and that's all that matters.
That's what really matters.
And I remember the day, I'll never forget this. This is one of my favorite times when I came over during the eclipse.
Oh, yeah.
And in fact, I posted a picture because I, had the brilliant idea that we were going to lay down on the ground and take selfies. Hey, why not? Let's try this. But I will say that it get some, pretty great photos.
That was such a great day because I mean, not only what a great event to experience, and it's like many of life's experiences, it's better shared, and then we and my sister and brother-in-law came down, and then we all went to lunch after that. That was just a really cool day.
It was, and I've just had so much fun with you over the years, and going to, in fact. Oh God!
She snorted.
I did snort. I did.
You know it's going to be good when Erica starts snorting. That's when the fun really starts.
Yeah. It's never a dull moment, sounding like some sort of farm animal. But anyway, God, you never know what you're going to get on the show. Either my audio engineering is failing miserably, or I'm sounding like a farm animal. I don't know. Whatever happens, but. So you have obviously, we've talked about what you've seen on a personal front with me and some of the attacks that I have had at the hands of special people that, anyway, and how hard that's been. And I thank you so much for sharing that again, because I think it's important. But you've also, you went to the conference with me. You saw some things. And what was your just...
I did see some things.
Yes,
I did.
Many things that were...
I saw a very diverse cross-section of people. And most of them were very interesting. I mean, we perhaps really bagged on people to the point that maybe the listeners don't understand that there are some really, really great people out there. And I know that you mentioned some of the great people that you've made lifelong friendships with, and there were some really nice, wonderful people at this particular conference, and man, the weirder, the more interesting, as long as they weren't mean.
Right.
So that was a lot of fun.
Well, I think, the one thing that I really feel, obviously the UFO community does attract people that can be dangerous, and people that are looking to make money or just different things like that. But I also think, like I mentioned, there are people like myself who are looking for a community and a way to try to talk about things that have happened. And you also have people that are attracted to, the alternative health and wellness and things like that are, I think very cool, until you get to the point where you're selling things or promoting ideas that are not in the best interest for other people. And so it is interesting, but there were a lot of great people there. And like I said, I do have a lot of friends that I just adore in this subject. And they've been through, stories like mine. And, but it's one of those things. So,
well, people that have had an experience and recognized it as such are typically more open-minded than the people that experience something and write it off. And because of that open-mindedness, sometimes it's really easy to fall into the traps of the really fringe things out there. And so it's really tough to not fall into those pits of despair when you're so open-minded and if you've had an experience and you need to talk to someone about it, that's great. But then sometimes those people do have their own fringe beliefs, and it's really hard to not fall into that.
Well, and the thing that's been really interesting for me and alarming is the fact that a lot of the people that fall into this subject are surrounded by other people who have a vested interest in making money and steering the agenda for political or religious reasons. And, this has been very evident. I mentioned last week with people that were posting videos of them standing next to the Proud Boys at the Capitol insurrection. And, that seems to be no big deal because, I guess that's what you do. Hopefully people have looked at some of the video that has been released over the past couple of days and could see how incredibly gross and very dangerous and serious that is. And we really shouldn't be even thinking it's okay to support or give somebody a break for thinking that that's a cool thing. In my opinion, I think it's just kind of disgusting. But
yeah, I remember one of the really prevailing comments that I heard when I was at Contact in the Desert, and that was really my first. I mean, I'd hung out with you, and I'd you and I had talked about your research and the whole field, but I'd never been around a large group of people that were all into ufology to that degree. And one of the prevailing things that I heard from people was, hey, Alex Jones is going to break this wide open. And Alex Jones is not someone who tells the truth very often or at all. And so when I started to realize that these people were holding Alex Jones up to be kind of the pinnacle or the conduit through which ufology was going to be taken seriously by the masses, I was like, that's probably not going to turn out the way you think it's going to.
So you heard that even back then?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But remember, I mean, not only was it Alex Jones, but I can't remember who on that panel, that very last panel at night that we went to, was talking about the Pope and how the Pope was going to issue and I can't remember the term that he used, but he was going to issue something within the Catholic Church that was going to recognize not necessarily ufology, but the whole concept that we are not alone and that there are other intelligent life forms out there. And it was something along the lines of an edict. And I just thought to myself, okay, granted, this Pope Francis is the most progressive Pope I think that the Catholic Church has ever had. But I really don't think that that's something that Pope Francis spends a lot of time thinking about, and I think is probably smarter to know that if he suddenly were to dive into the existence of other life in the universe being out there and how that is normally recognized as challenging the existence of God, that he would be taken seriously about that. I mean, he was already getting in trouble for all sorts of stuff, and then he's going to put UFOs on the plate. That's just not gonna happen. And so people were laughing at the guy like, yeah, the Pope's going to talk about UFOs, and he threw down the gauntlet like, you mark my words, the Pope is going to issue this edict, and you'll see. And then, of course, it never happened.
Well, and it's interesting because, you start to look back, and I've been really fortunate with all of the things I have in my archive now, because I can look back decade after decade after decade after decade, seeing the same stuff, people saying the same things. We are on the verge of a breakthrough, and the whole world will know, and it's just like, in fact, I'm going to do, I would like to, my goal is to release specific papers that document this historically. Okay, so here we've got, now the To the Stars Academy and, whatever the circus monkeys are doing today. With that, it's like the Great Oz has spoken, and today,
right,
we're going to get this group together and talk about Tic Tacs, or we're going to get this, and that, I read the New York Times article back in 2017. You and I've talked about it, where, we are on the verge of dun 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 disclosure. Guess what? 70 years later, that isn't happening. So we need to get over it. And realize, A, that we don't need our government or people like Robert Bigelow to tell us that the things that we, already know, that we have experienced ourselves. And so I want to do that and put out the documentation to very plainly put that out there, that we keep doing the same thing. It's the same cycle. But then you get younger people involved, or you get other people involved who are feeling special, and then they've got to, they get this secret document leaked to them, or this guy from, the CIA is patting them on the back. And I mean, it's just like, oh, I mean, honestly, like sometimes if I talk about some of my experiences, it's like a freaking bad, I don't even know what, I don't even know what kind of novel. I don't even know if I could categorize. I don't know, but it is really strange. But yeah, so good times. But I wanted to talk a little bit now because you and I had a very interesting experience, because we went to, and this was way back when I, like many of you, have had this real fascination with Skinwalker Ranch. I mean, of course, I've read the book and it caught my eye. I had listened to lectures, 15 years ago here in Utah about Skinwalker Ranch, and it was this mysterious place where all of these paranormal happenings were taking place. And was there the potential that, a government, our government was involved? It was just all this stuff. And so you and I went up there and did the touristy thing at night.
Hung out on the dinosaurs and yeah.
and
that's what you do.
Drove to the gate, and that was I mean, it was. I look back at that and it's like, oh God, okay, that's a little comical in multiple ways, but I think it was kind of the most. I just remember when we got there, it was night and things, and there were these two ferocious dogs that were actually probably 100 years old in total, and that came over and just wagged their tails, and we could hear somebody, standing over in the bushes, get out of here, get out of here. It was like, oh,
now this is where the whole Scully and Mulder comparison comes into play, because we went up there and Erica was telling me all about she knew all about Skinwalker. This was my first foray into the ranch, and so she told me all of these things that seem, I'm a skeptic, and so I'm going to take them as far-fetched. And she said, we've got to try and get onto the ranch. We've got to try and get on. And so we drove down this lonely dirt road and found a gate. And as soon as we pulled up to the gate, these lights came on, and we got out of the car and Erica walked up and was like trying to talk to the guy, and his dogs are barking. And I'm out there just like, hey, what's going on? I mean, because I had no idea of all of the infamy that Skinwalker Ranch is known for. And so I thought it was really comical. I was just laughing, like, really?
I kind of was too. Yeah.
High-tech government facility that the CIA is involved with and the NSA is involved with, and what they have for security is a very old guy with two even older dogs.
Honestly, I've got to find that video. It was on my old computer that had some issues, but I just remembered that it was just like one of those things, and I felt like, it's like you get caught up in these stories, and it was so alluring and mysterious and sexy, and it's like, oh my gosh, how cool. And I'd always loved the paranormal anyway, and so I just was drawn to it, and it's like in my backyard and different things, and so it was really interesting, to go up there and just see that kind of roll out. It was like I was living in an alternate reality. It was just, it's almost like people put things out there and then they send you on these little wild goose chases to see how you're going to react and things and pull you into this story. And I definitely now that that's what Skinwalker Ranch was and is. It's just this, it's a kind of a fictitious thing, and obviously for that is hiding other things, and the people involved are definitely, especially with the Bigelow crowd, definitely a little shady. But that's okay. But I will say that all these experiences have made me grow, and I look back at that and think, oh God, what was I thinking? And I will be the first person to say, I will admit, when I'm, I mean, I have to laugh at this. I have to laugh at my whole process in all this. And I'm so glad you were there to see it. And just, I'm sure you went home after that and just went, oh, oy vey.
Well, it's a lot like the fashion industry in that the fashion industry is self-sustaining on the eccentricity of the designers. And ufology is very similar to that in that, there's not a lot of money to be made. I mean, I don't know a lot of millionaire UFO researchers, that are actually doing the work. But it's so easy to get involved into that cycle of, I believe, so it must be true. I believe it, so it must be true, and just going round and round and round. And being the skeptic, I always look at it like 90% of the stuff out there is crap. And I have to wade through the 90% of the stuff that is crap to actually get to the real stuff. That's my job as a skeptic. If someone says they saw something, 9 out of 10 people are going to see something that they didn't understand, but that are not necessarily otherworldly. and like you say, other people have ulterior motives, and so you have to wade through that too. Like, is this person really talking about their experience, or did they make this up, or is it all a fraud? And if it is, how do I politely remove myself from this and actually get on to something that actually matters, something that actually happened? It's tough. You really do have to be in it and recognize the crap for what it is before you can find the really good stuff.
Well, and that's the thing. I think, when people talk about being a skeptic or things, and I've had plenty of skeptics on my show before, and they always stress that it's not that they don't think that there could be something going on. It's just that they need to look at things and rule out every possibility to make sure that something is genuine. And it's like, I mean, that wouldn't that be the best? Because then you really know what you're looking at, if you put it through the paces, is something of merit. And so I get, I have a dear friend of mine, Gordon Lohr, who is going to be 85 in March, and he is co-authoring a book with me, and he's just a lovely human being. And he was in NICAP back in the 60s, which was an important organization. And he and I have been having some conversations, because the book is, the more I learn about things and the more my opinion changes to maybe a more skeptical, quote unquote, type of mindset, the more he's, we've just had these conversations, and he just doesn't, he's having a hard time with where I am now. And it's just funny. And so I think I'll definitely have to bring Gordon on and have that conversation in public, because it really is good to have these talks about things. But it's just, I don't know. Just
sometimes you need a little taste of reality to to shake you back into being intellectually curious about something. And that's true of ufology, and it's true of basically everything else in the human experience. You need to have that intellectual curiosity and be mature enough to say, I so want to believe this is true. I so want to believe that Skinwalker is everything that it's been built up to be, before you find out that it's not.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really, I look at that and I think of Bigelow behind a little curtain and all the flying monkeys coming out. I mean, it really is, the great Oz is speaking, and this is what we're saying now. And now he's diverted his attention into, I don't know if you saw, Matt, the New York Times did a piece on Robert Bigelow, and now he's moving into the consciousness studies, or at least that's what he's diverting attention to, because he's obviously been looking into that for a long, long time. Has funded different research projects with that, studying all of that, or studying something that's using that as a cover. But it's just so funny. It's like there is nothing. I have not seen really any credible evidence, any research coming out of any camp that supports anything paranormal going on at the ranch.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard stories. My husband, Chris, was there and, saw a shape-shifting werewolf. I mean, what it was, we're not quite sure. Now that I've done a lot of research on different types of technology that we've been developing, and we know that there were different contractors involved that are developing these technologies that can do some of these things. I mean, you have to wonder if I definitely think that's where that is going, but it's very curious. And then I look at the Uinta Basin, in as a whole, and we have a love of the military here in Utah, and I think we can get away with a lot of things in Utah and what has happened up in the Uinta Basin. And I want to just really quickly, because I found this article earlier, and when I was researching radiation fallout, and Utah has a really interesting history. And if people don't know about Dugway Proving Ground is one of the largest chemical and biological weapons testing facilities in the world. And Utah is home to the NSA and the Utah Test and Training Range, Hill Air Force Base. We have a lot of stuff going on here, but here is just a brief thing that I'm going to read before we get into the interviews that I think will be enlightening for some of you. So this article is from the Deseret News. It's called Cold War Weapons Testing. It was from December 22nd, 1994 by Lee Davidson. And it says, this is Dugway documents obtained through the Freedom of Information Act through the years show at least 328 open-air germ warfare tests occurred at Dugway. Some of the agents used caused such diseases as parrot fever, Q fever, the plague, botulism, and anthrax. Other tests used what were supposed to be safer simulants, which critics later said could cause disease among the aged and young, or those who were already sick. Some of the tests also spread toxic cadmium sulfide to see where germs might float in the wind. Previous probes disclosed Dugway dropped cadmium sulfide throughout the eastern United States in a series of such tests. One test revealed in earlier probes that involved humans occurred in July 12, 1955. 30 human volunteers who were Seventh-day Adventist soldiers and conscientious objectors to combat were lined up in the desert with 75 rhesus monkeys and 300 guinea pigs. An invisible cloud of Q fever germs passed by them, then floated away towards the Cedar Mountains and US 40. The soldiers were then flown to Fort Detrick, where several developed the disease, which made a test success. All were treated and recovered. And then we have the nuclear bomb tests. Documents showed, and this is interesting, that the Energy Department showed the Nevada test site, we're talking about radiation, conducted 141 tests that likely spread radiation towards Utah, either open-air detonation or bombs underground. There were also tests like that through the decades at Dugway, and nearly 15,000 pounds of nerve agent VX were used in aerial tests at Dugway. In 7 tests, less than 63% of nerve agent VX fell within a 4-mile test area. In some cases, the VX was sprayed at a height of 254 and 1,200 feet, and other nerve agents were also spread. And it's just, I'm looking at all of this and all of these things where we have places, and it has been reported that Vernal in the area near Skinwalker Ranch, they had a significant amount of fallout in that area and different things. And so here in Utah, we've got a lot of testing facilities. And so I just wanted to read that because I just was, I don't know. I thought that is something that we should be aware of here.
Utah is in the West, and there's a lot of space in the West, and it's pretty easy to get away with things when you're nowhere near a population and you're nowhere near other people.
It is really interesting to note that, in Vernal, there was an article by the Rolling Stones a few years back, and they were talking about the high number of stillbirths, and they could not figure out what that was attributed to, and they were very concerned about it, but people that were asking questions about that were basically harassed and stopped asking questions about that. And then you look at the radiation levels that could potentially be on and around the ranch, and in the new TV show, they're talking about the dangerous levels of radiation, and they're talking about people, the cast characters, who are getting very severely injured or burned by radiation, and it is really quite fascinating. And that kind of brings me into the interview that we did when we went up to Vernal to meet this wonderful family who, with open arms, let us in there. And I had mentioned before the break that I was contacted by the grandson. They've all lived in that area their whole lives. So we interviewed, 3 generations of people. I continue to interview them. The grandmother, who was really the main focus of our interview that you did, and I'm so grateful you were with me to document this, has unfortunately passed away. But she had a series of experiences starting as a child, and she had one big experience. And I remember when I was first talking to her grandson, he told me about this time when his grandmother, they were out arrowhead hunting, and in an area very close, and she had wandered away and then went missing. And the family was very, very concerned about her. They looked for her for hours. When they finally found her, she was very disoriented, and she had a grid-like pattern of radiation burns on her. And so she went to her doctor, and the doctor did say that he felt they were radiation burns. Couldn't figure out how she got them. And unfortunately, because the doctor passed away many years ago, his files were destroyed, and so I could never get access to that. But it was really, really interesting. And so I'm going to just play a portion of our interview that Matt and I did with them. And this is the grandmother and the daughter talking about this specific experience. Remember when we interviewed her, do you remember how old she was when we interviewed her?
I don't remember her exact age, but her daughter was not far behind in age. So she was quite old.
Yeah, she was in her mid 80s, I think, then, and she, like I said, she did pass away. But they both, when they opened their home to us and brought us in there, I mean, they weren't sure that they wanted to really talk about it, especially the grandmother. She was very, very nervous, and it took us a while when we started to film them. We first started recording, and then later in the interview, I asked if we could roll the video. And it is really, it's so wonderful to look back and have to see that, Matt. So thank you for being there for this. But I'm going to play a 3-minute section of this interview that Matt and I did a few years back in the Uinta Basin.
They had left me alone. And they came, the plane, the whole thing came. And I guess it was at that time. But anyhow, I had burns on me. And they were little round spots. Blue and red. Little round spots on my body. And I went to the doctor. By the time I got an appointment with my doctor and went to my doctor, I only had 2 or 3 left on me. They would just go away, and you couldn't see where there was anything. But when he looked at them and he examined me, he said, well, I don't know what they are, but they are probably fallout. And he said, I don't know where you've been. And I told him where I'd been. He said, well, that's the only thing I can figure is that it is fallout or something else. But in a day or two, the other three, there were three of them, was gone. But I have a kernel in this side of my knee.
In your right knee.
And where is that other one? Every once in a while I find myself picking on it.
And so that, again, was just a portion of the interview. We were there for 2 days, and so we got more and more information. It was very interesting because she had mentioned that she had something under her skin, which we took photos of, and she had felt that was not natural. And mind you, this family, I mean, the grandmother had experiences since she was a very, very young child, and this is before, a lot of all of the skinwalker stuff took place, but she was very profoundly affected by whatever this was that she was interacting with or seeing. And as I mentioned, there has been a presence, a military presence in the basin, and I have a feeling that there's been stuff going on there for quite a long time. So who knows what is what and why the radiation burns and things. But I also, and Matt, do you remember hearing? I mean, you remember hearing that, but I mean, what were your thoughts when she talked about that?
Well, one of the most interesting things for me, especially being the skeptic with that family, was that it was a multi-generational experience that they were all sharing, starting with the grandmother, and perhaps started with her mother, but whether they talked about it back then is a little hard to tell, but it was a shared family experience. And so that's what was so interesting to me. And certainly, that could have been like the Ash conformity test, where you put a bunch of people in the room and they all start getting the same question wrong, and eventually the person who isn't in on it will start to answer the questions wrong just to be conforming to the group. But I didn't get that sense from this family. They were very genuine. They were leery. I mean, yes, here come a couple of strangers that they invite into their home, and there's some guy wearing a kilt who's hooking up lights and microphones.
Well, in Vernal, that
cameras.
certainly turned some heads.
And I do tend to stick out in a crowd because of things like that. Yeah. But at any rate, we started to roll audio, and they said, we'd rather not have the video on. And then here's the beautiful thing about having a woman be doing the interview. Eric is so good at it. They got very comfortable with her very quickly, only because Erica was able to, recognize that she was taking them seriously. And that it wasn't a joke, and they were not going to be ridiculed. They felt safe, and they were only able to get to that point because Erica was able to take them there. And so they did allow us to turn the cameras on, and we shot them in silhouette to start with. And then later on they said, sure, go ahead and turn on the lights, and we were able to see their faces. So they got very comfortable very quickly. And it was so interesting to hear just how matter-of-fact the mother was in all of it. And so when she was talking about getting her burns and so forth, and she said, I remember her saying that when they would come to her in her room, they had a machine there, and what they were exploring was there was something about her blood that was very interesting to them, and that made me think, okay, we sometimes think of other races of intelligent life out there being so much more advanced than we are. But it's also very possible that there are things beyond their technology that perhaps something about a human being, might have some sort of biological element that is beyond their understanding. They might be intelligent in so many other ways, but there's just something about human biology that they just don't understand, and that is perhaps beneficial to them, or that could cure diseases that they just don't have their heads wrapped around yet. And I remember her saying that she had implants in her body, and that they were still in her body, and she called them kernels. And I took that as being about the size of a kernel of corn. And she pointed them out, and she said, sometimes they move around, but I can usually find them. But just how matter of fact she was about it. And that it was a shared experience with not only her, but her daughter and her daughter's children. And I think maybe even a brother, but the brother didn't like to talk about it because he wasn't really as open-minded as they were, and was more frightened of the experience. But I think the most profound thing I remember was her saying that all of these experiences have really brought me comfort. And she talked about her life and how she'd had a good life, and she had good parents and a clean upbringing, and that all of these experiences had been beneficial for her. I thought that was really, really interesting.
Well, and I think the thing, that struck me as well is the fact that she did reach out. She, as a small child, she started having experiences, and she reached out to her family, and it didn't work out the way that she wanted to. And I think that she felt very isolated because of that. And also, she grew up in a very small community that is very religious.
Sure.
And so there were just a lot of different things. But I want to play a little clip here that you are talking about, because she had mentioned these beings coming into her room, and she actually said that there was the Godhead, which is an interesting choice, that was present in the room. And so I'm going to roll that clip right now and just let you guys hear that and hear the description of what she was seeing. This is very interesting.
If I'm going to tell you these things, I was sick for quite some time before my husband retired. Quite a few years. And I have osteoarthritis, which it don't show up on the outside, it's on the inside of me. And I was going out Salt Lake and back to have these treatments, and I had to wear a thing around my neck to keep my neck in place for some time. So anyhow, I remember this so well, because they would come and they'd be here, and they would be in my bedroom with me. Now, I'm telling you this because I don't know how else. Sometimes I think it's my imagination because I was sick, and sometimes I know that I'm denying it. But they would come, and they had a machine that they set up in there. It was a big machine. And I would wake up, and that machine would be there, and they'd be here, and they would work on me. They were different than we are, those people. And they would work on me, and they said my blood was different. And they was testing my blood. And they worked on me for a long time. And finally, I become tired. I was tired. And they said they needed to go and get some rest. And that they'd be back. And they made several trips like this to see me in there. And they were, this machine, this big machine, I must tell you about it. It was they called it the Godhead. Now, why they called it the Godhead, I don't know. I still wonder about it. Because it was truly the Godhead. That I know, but I don't know anything about it. But it's always been quite a thing, and things will come up, and I will remember things that we talked about in that.
That you talked to them
at that
about?
time, over and over, night after night, different times, that I would remember different things that they brought up during that time.
Can you tell me what they looked like? Can you give me any description of their
Well, they didn't scare me. Now, they didn't frighten me. They were different, yes, but they were people of a lighter color, a lighter blend, or something. And their eyes were bigger. And they had quite large ears, but they were people. They were just another class of people, finer people. And some things would be of an old time, even before my time.
Yeah, so I mean, here you have this very candid moment with this family who was so incredible to let both Matt and myself come into their home, and for 2 days we just sat there and filmed and talked, and they even mentioned the fact that they had seen an object that had come down by their home and had burned a very large section of grass, and that had just been a couple years before we had visited, right, Matt?
Yeah.
And so it's just, you hear this and you hear, I mean, again, it was such an interesting experience. And she hadn't grown up. I mean, back in the day, I mean, they were living in a very, very, very modest lifestyle. They were not out there and exposed to a lot of things, I would imagine, in the mainstream media or things. And these were experiences that she genuinely felt that she was having and really struggled with and didn't know who to turn to. And it was just a beautiful experience, when you've got people there. And I think, I get kind of teary-eyed when I think about this, but having, been through all the crap that I have, and then having these moments where I'm sitting with people like this, and I hear how much maybe pain they've been through because they haven't been able to talk about things, or how much, how much curiosity they have, all of these genuine things, you just want to do the best for people like that. And, for me, definitely now, the more I learn about the subject, I would be absolutely very unethical if I were to go into a situation like that and say, well, yes, you've had these experiences, and this is, Xanu from, the Pleiades, or, whatever, yada, 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 and trying to give my opinion about something that they're experiencing that we really have no way of proving one way or another what it is. But it is important to get people's testimony on record, and then to also keep that up. So this is a family I've kept in contact with and have interviewed time after time, and it has been interesting to see some of the other events that have taken place. And I definitely feel that the grandson understands that there's something that's taking place there that is not that is actually more probably from a man-made place. But I don't know. I mean, what did you think when you heard that?
The first thing that she said that kind of pulled at my skeptical thread that I carry around was when she called the machine a godhead, because godhead is a term that is used in, I know it's used in King James, and I don't think it was used in the Hebrew Bible, but Godhead is mentioned in King James, and it refers to essentially it refers to the Holy Trinity, and so when I heard that, I immediately thought, well, because she had just said, I was sick. I don't know if I was imagining it or how much of this was real. But when she called the machine a godhead, I kind of went, wait a minute. We're delving into a religious term here. And so, but then I realized, when they grew up, they were probably not doing a lot of Catholic studies. They probably grew up as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that the term Godhead would probably not be something, because and forgive me, I'm not a theologian, so I don't really understand this, but part of the bad press that the Mormon Church, I know that we're not supposed to say Mormon anymore, but that the LDS Church gets is that they don't really recognize the Holy Trinity. And the Catholics give them a lot of bad time about that. But at any rate, what struck me as so pure and so real about what she said later on was that she just referred to these beings as people. And that she actually told her daughter when her daughter started to experience things and be visited, she told her daughter, don't be afraid. They're just people.
Isn't that amazing? And it is interesting because I think, when you have experiences, you have to use your own frame of reference for things. And I do believe that the LDS Church does view the Godhead, God the Father, Jesus Christ, the Holy Ghost is the Godhead. And so it is, again, interesting that she kind of used that as a reference. It was so fascinating. And then there was the time that she was actually out. They went up, her and her husband went out to a campsite in their trailer, and they had a series of, they had missing time. And the kids were very, very concerned about them, and they apparently had a few days that they couldn't remember. And then when they came to, they saw that the bread was moldy, the milk had soured, and different things. And that was one of those experiences. And she also spoke about an experience with their grandson, who they had a bright object coming over their home, and the grandson, was in bed with her and just screaming and absolutely terrified. And then, she just tried to calm him and said, just go to sleep. It'll be over. It will be okay.
The other really interesting aspect about the way that she spoke about her experiences was when she was young, and she was going towards some body of water. I can't remember if it was a river or a lake or something.
River.
But okay, so she was headed for a river, and she was very young at the time, and one of these people appeared to her and said two things. One of the things was, seems somewhat ominous, and that was that you belong to me. He said, "You belong to me," or something to that effect. But then and that's puzzling. But the really interesting thing was that she got the sense that these beings were really cared about her well-being, and that this particular being said, "I don't want you to go near that water. That will not be good for you." And she was young enough that she very easily be swept away in a fast-running river, and so to feel protected by these beings from that she was being visited by, that was a really interesting thing. I don't really hear that from a lot of experiencers. Getting that sense of that they're very much cared for and very much looked after, especially over such a long lifetime and over so many experiences.
Well, and it was interesting too, because she had mentioned during that portion of the interview that one of her friends had actually been swept away, in that river. And that she was there just looking at it, was so angry and sad and things. And then this being, appeared to her and said these things. And so it was really just, the whole thing was so fascinating. I'm just going to, we're going to go a little bit later than 7, just because I want to play a couple more clips and then Matt get you to weigh in. So I hope you're groovy with that. I don't want to take you all night, but let me just say.
Totally. I'm here for you.
Okay, good. Thank you. I love it. And so I want to just play a little section about, and I've entitled it, "I Could See Them," and I'm going to play that right now. It's very interesting, and we'll get you guys to weigh in.
Denied it, didn't he, Karen?
Yeah, he was just...
And yet he'd come home telling me about what he saw.
Yeah.
So, but anyhow, this night, why, he was so frightened, the grandson was. And he said, "Well, what are we going to do now?" And I said, "Well, honey, we'll just not even worry about it. We'll just go to sleep and we'll be just fine." That's the last I remember. And yet we can remember things that they did, and them being there. And so twice in a while he goes back to that same place, but he never says anything to me about it. So darn good and well there's something taking him back there.
Something.
He's going back there for a reason. And I think he will tell me someday.
Isn't that funny how people process stuff like that?
Well,
he doesn't believe. He thinks that this is a big stretch for him.
Yeah.
And we saw, last summer we saw them together.
Uh-huh.
You could see, the color just draining from his face and his rational mind. Okay, this is, what is this? What is this?
Again, that was just a little teeny clip, and there's so much. There are hours and hours and hours of this interview that is just incredible. But it was, talking a little brief moment of that experience, and then there's also just one more thing that I want to play, and this is called, I titled this "Living with It," because this was kind of her thought process with having spent a whole lifetime dealing with this. So here this is.
Do you remember telling your mom, or was it just something that was understood without you talking about it?
Well, every time I would go to tell my mother and my dad, I was really distant with my dad over that for a long time because I needed to talk to somebody. And my mom was very acceptable, but she didn't want to talk about it, you know. But she did agree with me that she saw, you know. So mother was good, because I'm sure I'm not the only one that's went to her with that problem, because there were 7 of us. And she never told me not to talk to anybody about it, but you just don't talk about it, or you'd be better off. And you stop and think about it. What I've told you, you know that I would be better off not saying anything. I was better off not to even mention that. So it's just something I've lived with, and it's mine and mine alone, and it's kind of nice too.
You were so wonderful to share this with me. I think it's important for people.
Well, you know,
it's important, yeah.
they are not here to hurt us. Because had they been here to hurt me, they'd have surely done it a long time ago. They didn't hurt me. They never hurt me when they came to me. And even with taking the blood from me, I never felt it like it did when I went to the hospital. And that's what I was thinking. So, and in this big machine, there was this head that was in there, a godly head. This was what has always confounded me. This has been something that's been there. What? Maybe I'm just not going quite deep enough. And if I'm not, I'm going to find out, and I will. And if I ever do, I'll tell you.
Yeah. So it was just in this box, and it was just...
No, it was a big machine.
Machine? How big do you think it was?
About as big as that, from the frame of that door there to that frame over to that door.
Okay, so again, you know, like I said, there's so much more to this, and I have over the years shared little bits and pieces of this very remarkable 2-day interview, and Bruce had asked me in chat, you know, what their names were, and I can't. I have definitely promised that I would protect them and make sure, because I know how this works, and people who come forward with things like that can oftentimes, especially in small towns, or especially when there's a circus-like environment where vultures are waiting to come in and try to manipulate people, I just have an obligation to keep everybody as safe as I can, and so that is my goal. But it was such a an interesting experience, from talking to the grandson, who again I still talk to, and talking to the family, the mother, the grandmother, and then also the brother came in while we were there, Matt, right? Remember that? And he was talking about a couple of experiences that he wouldn't, want to go on record with.
Yeah. Yeah, he seemed to be more interested in the pizza or something like that. He was like, "Hey, y'all done with this? Because I think it's time to go get pizza." Or there was a restaurant that they were going to take us to, or something. He was all about that.
Yeah. So I mean, it's been an interesting thing, and like I said, that whole area is so. There's so many interesting stories, and it's not unlike a lot of other areas, all over the country, all over the world, where people have experiences. And then I think the unfortunate thing, like I've mentioned tonight and a million times before, is that you've got, a book like Hunt for the Skinwalker, and then movies like Hunt the Skinwalker, and things where you've got people who are trying to, definitely push a narrative down a specific place without really giving a lot of anything that's actually verifiable. The research that the Bigelow did there has never been put forward. None of these, there's nothing other than these stories that you can collect from people. And so, and Bruce, so the location is they were just right outside of Vernal, Utah. And they also, and I want to say, Matt, and I'm sure you remember this too because you've got such a great memory. They talked about being friends with a person that used to be a long time ago was the caretaker of the ranch and the Skinwalker Ranch, and how there was one time, and I about fell off. Well, actually, I was sitting on the floor, so I didn't have far to fall. But the mom.
This is about the beef, right?
Oh my God! So the mom mentions that this fellow that was working as the caretaker of the ranch brought some mutilated cattle for them to eat, and they did.
And they said it tasted awful.
Yeah.
And they actually had to tell him, please stop bringing us that mutilated cow meat. It's just not good.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it was a wonderful experience. And I'm happy that you were there to so brilliantly document that for me, because I look back on that, and I messaged you a while ago and I just said, Matt, thank you so much again for doing this, because as I look back on this and as the years go by and as I learn more information, I just think that this was just for many reasons so important to have that and to see their beautiful faces and to see the sincerity in their eyes and the interactions between the mother and the daughter. That was very, very touching.
Well, and kudos to you for getting them to be so open about it. I'm sure that, because it was a family experience and because it was a small town, there's just, in a small town like that, you conform, especially when there is a predominant religion that essentially says you have to conform. And if there's anything outside of that, keep your mouth shut about it. And so for you to be able to get them to talk about it so willingly and so openly, that was really cool to see you work your magic and get people so comfortable that they will actually disclose family secrets because they believe in your mission.
Well, thank you. That was really cool. And for somebody who is, like you said, that you are skeptical of these things and rightfully so, thank you for grounding me a lot of times and holding my hand and doing all of those things and just being along for the
and
crazy ride.
And it's not easy, folks. It's not easy. Erica is determined. She is passionate about what she believes. She is tenacious. She has hard times letting things go, especially when she knows she's right. And a lot of the time she is. But sometimes you do just need to be pulled back down to planet Terra. and that's what I'm here for.
And thank you. I mean, you and I we should write a book about our experiences together, because it's just been a trip, and it's been interesting to see you from your perspective, because it is just this completely, differing viewpoints. But now I will say that my viewpoint is coming around now that to yours. So it's a trip. But Matt, thank you for being my friend. Thank you for being a wonderful human being and for documenting a lot of this, which is really important. So I love you.
I love you too. Anytime, my dear.
Thank you. And I want to just thank all of my listeners for being out there and supporting the show, getting information out there. Like I said, I've got people that are contacting me that are just shocking. To be honest, I mean, people are paying attention to this show and they're paying attention to the work that I'm trying to do. And I'm glad that I've got a lot of people that are grounded, that want to ask questions, but understand that we are working through a lot of different things: disinformation, delusional behaviors, and people's own belief systems that they're kind of trying to promote and encourage other people to follow suit. So we got a lot of work to do. We're going to continue to do it. You can go to UFOclassified.com to pledge your support to the show. I want to thank all of the people that do very much. Steve, Bruce, Sue, all of the wonderful people that are doing that. And I also just want to give a big shout out to my other friend who has been here for 6 years on UFO Classified, Mario. Thanks for your help. And Scott, I love you guys. Please stay safe. Please make sure that you wear a mask, and definitely try to separate ufology from politics and religion, and let's actually do some good work. Thanks, guys. Stay safe. Have a good night.
So my skeptical mind, and that's just who I am. My skeptical mind goes to, well, yeah, of course, you've got this guy over here that's logical and reasonable, and you got this guy over here that's wearing a tinfoil hat. Of course, the tinfoil hat guy's gonna see a lot of stuff, right? He's like imagining it, or he's watched one too many sci-fi movies.
But it can be used to help us frame hypotheses for UFO propulsion, power, stealth, weaponry.
Everything that we experience is very positive.
Sometimes the field of ufology has a short memory span.
We didn't know anything about the $22 million back then. We just kind of thought, well, this is, and I think that was the reason why they were looking for military-type people, because in the military, you work with whatever you got, no matter what the situation is, and you just kind of adapt and overcome.
What are you going to do with all this? You can't even take care of your own files and get them put into the current system, but yet you want to go collect other people's things. So where are you going to go with this? Who are you giving all this to?
It just really struck me about how the common thread seemed to be deception, but deception of a human nature. So that's what I started thinking, who would these folks be? I mean, then I started thinking about the intelligence agencies, what role they could play, and what would be their motivations for getting involved in ufology.
I'm not saying that because the gimbal is not a rotating flying saucer, that means that all UFOs are false. Not at all. All I'm doing is I'm looking at this one case, these individual cases, and seeing if there's an explanation for those. So try to, if I could ask people out there listening, don't think that I'm trying to attack your entire beliefs about these things.
Nice to be in orbit.